our topic, I guess it's our...
You have to say our topic tonight.
Yeah, our topic tonight is part of our series of where Leandro and I are reacting to different, in this case, it has been Jesus-focused movies. In this case, Jesus is not appearing in this film, or does he, or does Christ? Maybe, we'll see. As we are looking instead at a kind of Gen X 90s, it's not exactly an indie film because this one actually had a budget, but essentially from the this movie from the person who kind of revolutionized indie films in the 1990s, Kevin Smith's kind of religious, spiritual exploration / also just trying to have a good time comedy satire, Dogma, and this is one that people have asked for.
Didn't know this was the same creator of Clerks.
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know. I mean, I knew that. I knew about this movie. I knew about Clerks. I didn't know there was a connection there. So.
Yeah. Well, so you hadn't seen this movie?
I had not seen this movie.
And you haven't seen Clerks?
I haven't seen Clerks. I've seen clips of Clerks. Yeah.
So yeah, I'll just say in terms of my bona fides, I'm from this generation, right, Gen X. So I was born the same year as both Kevin Smith and Matt Damon. And I saw Clerks in the theater when I was in grad school in Ann Arbor, so just in a little indie theater. And I was also really, kind of struck by it as a different kind of thing. Here's a movie that was made for whatever it was, $20,000, just a really something that it was very dialogue based. It was very Gen X referential, where there's all of this people who are regular working class people talking to younger people, talking to each other, kind of feeling a little despondent about the future. They're in dead-end jobs, and their conversations are revolving around, making Star Wars.
And you see some of those
like
themes here as well.
Some of the themes are continue to be explored here, and this created for Kevin Smith as he went on to become. He continued to be an indie filmmaker. Although he had a big backing of Miramax, which ends up being it was at the time the main indie film studio, whatever, owned by Disney, but unfortunately also, it's obviously the Weinstein Company, so it's ends up having this clouded future and present that people didn't know about at the time, or I didn't, and so after Clerks. Kevin Smith then did what he thought would maybe be a little bit more commercial movie called Mallrats. And so he brought two of these characters, Jay and Silent Bob. He's creating what he's calling, his company's called the View Askew, and it becomes the View Askew-universe, I guess. And so Mallrats, I think, wasn't as well received. Anyway, it's just filmed in a mall, actually, in the suburb next to where I grew up. It was one of the malls we would go to when I was a kid.
That sounds like a movie I have seen.
You might have seen Mallrats. Yes. Then he had one that was more of a breakthrough called Chasing Amy, and then this Dogma is the fourth movie. And I think he wanted to do this one right away, but he was afraid that it was too much for him. He hadn't had enough experience as a filmmaker to do this one right away, so I think that's why he held out. And so this one's the first one that had a lot of budget, and then it's also, of all of his films set in this universe, this one is the one that had the best at the box office. So it's generally considered a successful movie, certainly a movie that has been very, very thought-provoking. I watched this when it came out too, but I haven't seen it since until when Leandro and I watched it, was it last night? 2 nights ago.
Few
2 nights ago. Yeah.
Nights ago, yeah.
So the movie.
Disclaimer. Yeah.
So the movie begins with a series of disclaimers, including this, starting what a disclaimer is, and then having defined disclaimers. He goes on to more or less saying, we're making this film start to finish as a work of comedic fiction. It's not to be taken seriously. To insist that any of what follows is incendiary or inflammatory is to miss our intention and pass undue judgment. And passing judgments reserved for God and God alone. And that goes for film critics. You're not supposed to pass judgment.
Yeah, and I almost stopped watching at this point. It's like, really, why do you need to do this, right? Is this really necessary to put this thing at the beginning of the movie, or like, what are you afraid of? And I guess, like, we did watch together the Last Temptation of Christ, and this movie was
They also put
like,
a disclaimer on the front of that.
almost like 10 years earlier.
Right.
But it had this terrible backlash and actual violence at theaters.
Yeah.
And so you could see why there would be a little bit of concern. And
Well, they
even
did, but this happened. But in terms, there was already backlash for this one. So before it came out, I've read about this anyway, that apparently an early script was leaked, and then a lot of people were protesting based on that script, even though I think the main things that they were really upset about, those didn't actually make it into the film anyway. So it's like an early version of the script. And I think you were saying that then it actually also, Kevin Smith himself...
Kevin Smith actually did go to one of the protests against his own movie, which was a just very successful marketing move, because then people saw that on TV and they thought, oh, this is great, let's go watch this movie.
Well, and the other thing that happened too is that it spooked, Miramax was owned by Disney, and so the potential backlash spooked Disney. Disney refused to distribute it, and so again, the now very discredited Harvey Weinstein created his own distribution company in order to distribute this movie. And so there is, anyway, so I think they're reacting to that. So then this continues.
But I do think that in addition to that, this is a good disclaimer for us as viewers to remind us, okay, this is not the same thing that the creator of The Last Temptation of Christ, for example, is trying to do. I don't think Kevin Smith here is trying to make theological statements. I think he is trying to make a funny movie.
Yeah.
Now that is very debatable, like whether the movie is funny or not. But I'll let you be the judge of that. I'm usually very suspicious of comedy in general.
Well, and so yeah, so I think that I believe that it's actually quite an earnest kind of spiritual exploration on his part from a person who is a not a trained person in any of these things, but in other words, based on his own spiritual feelings as someone who grew up Catholic in a generation that was starting to kind of also feel like the world was bleak. You can kind of see that those same issues in Clerks, where those characters are worried about what is their purpose in their life? Are they going to be?
That's the one thing that I really appreciated about the movie. It gives us a snapshot of what was happening in the religious landscape of Gen Xers in the 90s.
Yeah.
And I think he does a pretty accurate job at that, with silly things added, of course.
Yeah.
Although we were kind of silly anyway, so.
So the disclaimers go on. I think this is sort of the disclaimer now starts to maybe be a reference to all of the credits at the beginning of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where the credits start talking, and it's talking about my sister once ate a moose. So anyway, now it says, remember, God has a sense of humor. Just look at the platypus. And then we also apologize for platypus enthusiasts, anyway. So they don't want to, they don't want to upset anybody. Thanks again. Enjoy the show. So that's the disclaimers as we go. So from there, then the movie starts. Ready?
Let's go.
So we start in Kevin Smith's hometown on the Jersey Shore, and there's a boardwalk, like all of these great Jersey old cities have, and there's, I guess, what's meant to be an indigenous man who's nevertheless quite smiley, and he is waiting for skee ball, presumably, to open up. But as he is just enjoying,
he's just standing there, just being happy, looking at the ocean, right?
Yeah, maybe so. He's definitely just enjoying it. But then suddenly, some of these rollerblader, street hockey kids from the Jersey Shore, which I guess. I didn't end up ever watching. Did you ever watch the reality TV show Jersey Shore? Which is later, right? So, but it's the idea. I think the idea is that they. Anyway, I don't want to characterize it. I never saw the show. So anyway, so this is it's a rougher place, I guess.
No, reality TV is a very incomprehensible concept for me.
So. Okay. And so these kids end up beating up the old guy. Mercilessly. So, and then from that we cut.
And we don't know what happened.
Yeah, we don't know.
To him, or who he is, or who these kids are. We only know that they are in this this city where Kevin Smith is from.
Right. And this is all a pre-credit sequence, so it's like a teaser before the credits, like in Star Trek or something, before the whole series, the main show opens up. And it's cut very tightly, so the action is moving fast. We run now to a press conference in front of a Catholic cathedral where a cardinal, played by George Carlin, is out announcing essentially the re-christening of this cathedral as part of the Catholicism WOW program, which is rebranding this age-old faith of Catholicism to something that is more with it for, being able to speak to young people in the 1990s.
Yeah, and I have to say, when you start looking at like old church pamphlets and things like that, not just Catholic, but from other churches, there's this like, I would like to say that this is very exaggerated, but it's not so exaggerated. I've seen just crazy, goofy, cartoony ways of presenting religion in a way to appeal to younger urban audiences. Now, what I see here happening is maybe an exaggeration of the whole Vatican II effort to modernize the Catholic Church, but it also applies to Protestant churches in this period, trying to, I would say, it's like a contextual theology move in a way, if you will. Like the contextual theology, the idea is that you can impose one kind of expression, of religious expression everywhere. Now, when we think about that, we think about, okay, how the Christianity is expressed perhaps in Africa or South Asia or Korea, but it also applies everywhere, including North America, of course, because North America has a context.
Right.
And so in a way, this move that these churches are doing at the time is trying to make church relevant to the lives of people in this particular part of the world at this time. But of course, it probably didn't go the way it was intended. And so this is a satire to that effort.
It's a satire to it. And I think it's a fairly, I think it, in one critique that's probably true here is that there are, from my experience in being part of a church hierarchy, and also, by the way, as the representative of our church on the Canadian Council of Churches, so then I also get to talk to the other leaders of all the denominations of the Christian churches in Canada. There is a little bit of, the leaders are all older guys, like George Carlin, who are trying to do something that's going to be cool for younger people, or well, not cool, but let's say, they want to do something to update it contextually in that sense, and maybe it's not going to be that successful. So in the particular movie, he's saying the crucifix is pretty grim,
right.
And so they're replacing this image of Jesus with buddy Jesus. Jesus is your buddy, and I don't think that that's entirely something that didn't happen. So I do think that, for example, evangelical pop music, I always kind of call this Jesus is your boyfriend kind of thing, as we were really singing these kind of pop love songs. And so I do think that this kind of thing does happen in this kind of contextualization, although not to this particular satire of it. This is satire. So
that Jesus loves you, and that's it. That's all you need to know. You don't need to know the bad parts, the suffering. So smiley Jesus. I grew up in going to Catholic school, and it was all smiley Jesus. Not like that kind of smile, but still was.
But the problem is, as we're maybe going to find out in this movie, is that when you are having Jesus as your buddy Jesus here, then when all of the different people are experiencing suffering in the movie, and specifically where they feel like their life hasn't been fair to them, they have no way to process how that works. What is that? Why would that be? Isn't Jesus my buddy? Why hasn't this been? Why is my life like
this? He keeps smiling.
Yeah. I just took this frame cap of George Carlin is a very funny comedian. He's I mean, simultaneously at this kind of time period, he was like the Rufus from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and all those kind of movies, right? And he's been a lot of other things. But he's, I think, pretty famously an atheist comic, and so he did this because it would be fun to be a cardinal, right? But one of the things we should point out, just like the disclaimers, this is also played. It's not played really. A lot of people are not playing this very realistically. It's not meant to be. There's all kinds of cartoony things that are happening, and also the way people are acting, including certainly all the facial expressions and accent and everything that George Carlin's doing, and that's meant to emphasize a surrealness, I think, of it, or indie, the Kevin Smith's indie cheap style. I don't know, So maybe that's part of what it is. It was also one of the things. We can talk about it. Oh, we'll start with. So we go from there, and now we cut again. This is a very tightly cut intro. We haven't even gotten to the opening credits yet. And so we cut to an airport in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where Matt Damon, who is identified as Loki, is having a little discussion, or actually kind of a discussion about religion with a nun.
Yeah, and it's Loki, right?
It's called Loki, and of course he's played by Matt Damon.
It's not really a name of an angel.
Right. Well, not in, so that's true. I mean, so we will eventually be described. Do we want to go through the description of him as long as
go
we're
ahead.
at it?
Let's go through
Okay.
the scene.
And then we next are identified with the second person. Next, we'll find out is another angel, Bartleby. Of course, is played by Ben Affleck, and they have just become had a breakup film, I guess, Good Will Hunting, right before this, and so they've become.
Know a lot of movies.
So actually, I don't really. I just think that this is how they've become. Like, this is right at the beginning of like an entire now career of being buddies, and this is, I think, maybe the second movie where they're kind of have started down that path, and so. So anyway, Matt Damon continues on, and he has this sort of, I think, not very convincing, thing where he's, talking about, I don't know, the problems with organized religion and faith and all this kind of thing, and why there's no God, and a fairly juvenile discussion has then unhinged the nun who decides that she's lived her life wrong, and she needs to now go off and what's she going to do now that she's become a nihilist. And then when that ends, Ben Affleck is rolling his eyes, I think, because Matt Damon's points aren't very good, but it still
I think
works.
that conversation is very important because it really sets the tone of what people had in mind at the time. These conversations were happening. It's not necessarily that people were saying smart things. People still don't say smart things today, but definitely.
I'm just saying you could make good arguments.
But if we're making good arguments, then that's not the point. What we're showing is like a snapshot of what was going on at the time, and these arguments against organized religion that were happening at the time that were perhaps not as sophisticated as you could imagine.
It's a popular conversation.
Right.
And
so
this
it's
is reflecting that.
It's a pop argument.
Yeah. And so, she decides, I think, to think her life. But then, it turns out, Bartleby tells Loki that, here you've made this entire argument when there's a God, because you've stood before God, because we're angels and all this kind of thing. And so I guess Loki just likes to mess with people we hear.
But he's a trickster. Oops. Yes.
Well, that's the thing. So it is interesting that that they've decided to pick this name Loki, because again, Loki obviously is, as we know, a Norse god, and a part of this trickster thing, and is not, as he's going to be revealed, the angel of death is not the name, would not be that name. So he's eventually revealed that he is the original angel of death. So the angel that God sends to Egypt, or to Sodom and Gomorrah, specifically, and rains fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah, and he's also kills the firstborn of Egypt, right? The angel of death. And that, may well, so a name for that might be something like Mot, which is the Canaanite god of death that gets downgraded to be like an angel of death in the biblical stories. But instead, we have the name Loki. Loki's not really a god of death, I don't think. Maybe death is one of his things.
No, but is one of these Norse gods that, like in Ragnarok, is going to be like one of the fighting sides, and it's going to bring the world to to an end.
Right.
But then there's like a new world. But there is this association with Loki and the death of Baldur and destruction and chaos to an extent. But he's primarily a trickster, right?
Right. And so he's like part of the archetype of like coyote in indigenous traditions, or like the youthful Hermes in Greek mythology, where he's running around and stealing Apollo's cattle and that kind of thing, whatever, all the things like that. So it's more of that kind of a figure as opposed to the god of, the bringer of death, Thanatos, or something like that. But I think that though one of the reasons why he might be Loki is that Kevin Smith is a huge comic book guy.
Oh, okay.
And this movie is set in the same kind of time period that the comics / graphic novel series, The Sandman, that Neil Gaiman made, is made, and there are all of these kind of cosmic figures that include one of the major characters in that is Loki.
It's Loki.
And Death is another one. But anyway, and then there are also Satan's one of the major characters in that, but then also there's two angels that God sends to take over hell when Lucifer quits hell.
Right.
And one of them is an angel of silence, Duma. And I just kind of feel like there's both these two angels here, and some of the things that happen, including like cutting off wings and things like that that there's a major influence maybe that the Sandman comic has on this.
And even this theme of mixing mythologies with
the Greek
of different places, Greek, Norse, Israelite.
Right, that's right. Yeah, exactly. All right, so they're having their little conversation. The Bartleby explains that he's actually, what his role is as one of the Watchers. And so this is a name for, a type of angel, especially that's focused in the Enoch tradition, so all the books of Enoch, and essentially these are drawn from that. The Watchers is also part of that tradition. It's in Genesis, where they talk about the sons of God and the daughters of men, met together, and their offspring are the heroes of old and things like that. And so he's obviously not a Watcher that is has taken a wife, because it's made very clearly in this movie that angels are non-gendered, which is correct theologically, and so it's not one of those kind of angels, but that's the idea. And so the magic power, therefore, that Ben Affleck has is that he's watched everything that everybody's done, so he knows everything. And so he likes humans, he knows about them, and so he's pointing out...
He does like humans. That's at least at this point in the movie.
At this point in the movie, yeah. And so he's just pointing out like their qualities and things like that. One of the things that's happening here is, it's also interesting, they go to hang out in airports so they can watch when like people come out of the gate and see each other. And this is all pre 9/11, kind of way to do. Airports aren't like this anymore, but this is something. Mike lived in Milwaukee, and he and his family would go to the airport and do this, where they would go visit the airport. Yeah, but you can't, obviously after 2001, you can't do that anymore. So. We're still before the credits, and so this has been quite fast moving to set this all up. So one of the things that happens now is Bartleby tells Loki, I've got a way to get us back. They have not been able to, they've been kind of exiled here in Wisconsin.
Have they told us already what the problem is? No, I think they just started talking about the solution before we even know what the problem is.
We don't know it yet, you're right.
Which is very common. It's a very common thing that people do.
But that's also smart to set a movie up. It makes you want to watch it. So anyway, they found the solution. The solution is this same church that we saw, Catholicism WOW, and the main thing that we also find out about it, there's Buddy Jesus again. The main thing that we find out about it is that there is going to be they're going to be giving out plenary indulgences. So when you go to this special church, part of the idea is you're going to get a plenary indulgence if you walk through the gate of this church to be part of it. And so I don't know that they explain what that means yet either.
I don't think they explain that.
Yeah, so we can explain it when it comes to it.
Right.
But anyway, that's the setup. And then they also must say that they're going to get back to heaven. So they know that they've got like 4 days until this thing comes off, and then they'll be back in heaven. And so while they're doing it, they decide, well, the last 4 days they're going to go on a killing spree. And so they kind of say that out loud, which shocks the lady in the elevator. He says, "Oh, we're not going to kill you. Don't worry."
And I think at this point is still we still don't really know what is going on, but we begin to learn a little bit about both characters. The one, Bartleby, seems to be the one that is more sympathetic to humanity, and Loki seems to be the one that he thinks that his duty is to go and just kill
smite
sinners.
Right. So he's the angel of death. That's been his function. He
wants to do his job according to the way he understands his job.
Yeah. All right. So that was that got us to the opening credits, and so that was I think a very economical portion of the movie. We next introduce our protagonist, who is in Catholic Church in McHenry, Illinois, and this is Bethany. So Bethany is named for the village near Jerusalem in the Gospel of John where Lazarus is from, and his sisters Mary and Martha. And her priest is mentioning, I think, maybe about the Catholicism WOW thing, but more importantly for the plot is telling us that vagrant guy is now being called Catholic John. What is it? No, it's some New Jersey Joe, John Doe, New Jersey, whatever. I don't remember what he's called. Anyway, so he's in a coma, and because he's indigent, because he's homeless, the hospital wants to pull the plug on him, but the Catholic Church is protesting that as part of their broader pro-life policy. They're against euthanasia in any event, and so that's introduced as a thing. And so then, but you also wanted to say...
Yeah, no, but we can continue and we can talk about Bethany in general. Yeah, it turns out that Bethany, even though we first see her at church, hearing about all the Catholic Church anti-euthanasia positions, now also turns out she works at an abortion clinic, and you have all these supposedly Catholic protesters
Are
outside.
they Catholic?
I don't know if they are, but in this movie it seems like we have a very Catholic framework.
Okay.
Yes, she's Jewish, but everyone
Right.
else seems to be Catholic, and there seems to be nothing else. There's Protestants are mentioned as a thing.
There's like one Protestant.
Yeah.
The mayor of the city in New Jersey is a Protestant.
But other than that, seems to be a very Catholic framework that we're talking about. So yes, let's say anti-abortion.
Anti-abortion activists. This
yes.
is the kind of thing that I think hopefully maybe it is still continuously happening. Probably Roe versus Wade is over. If these guys are still all doing this, I don't know.
I've seen that
here
not too long ago. I don't know if they were Catholics or what, but yeah,
Okay.
that still exists.
All right. So that was happening, and it certainly probably still exists then. And Janine Garofalo, who's her friend who works at the place as well, who's Jewish, but is like many Jewish people, kind of a post-religious, cultural Jewish person, is given her advice as they're kind of talking about the meaning of life, and Janine Garofalo can't really believe that Bethany still goes to Mass and all these things.
And again, there's a parallel here between the conversation that Loki was having with the nun at the airport. We're not talking about very sophisticated arguments, but her friend here has a very just practical approach. And like, why would you go to church if you don't believe in anything? Do you believe in anything? And the interesting thing when we first see Bethany, this character, is that she's at church reciting the Nicene Creed. Yeah. I believe in one God, she says. These are the first words that she says in the whole movie. But then it turns out that she doesn't really believe she has lost connection with her God, that she says she remembers a time when she was a child when she did feel moved by religion, but she clearly doesn't feel it anymore, but she still goes to church. And I think that also shows how a lot of people were at the moment. Still, you had to go to church maybe every now and then, maybe not every Sunday, but really you just didn't feel like there was anything there. But you still had something in the back of your mind that made you go, what is that something in the back of your mind? And the movie is going to explore that. What makes you go to church?
I think that when she was talking about having faith when she was a child, I think this is where she makes the analogy that, like that faith is like a glass of water. And when I was a child, I had a very small glass, and the water filled it up.
Yeah.
And now I have a big glass, and,
well, it
and
was
the water,
easy, right?
Yeah,
Like
the
when
water
you were...
doesn't fill it up. And I think that this is also also a appropriate indictment of churches, which is that they teach something to kids which isn't quite right in order to be useful as an adult, because there's a desire to really dumb things down and tell stories in a very different way, to children, and so then that doesn't immediately flow into it. As opposed to doing something foundationally, it's almost like a very simplified and incorrect way of teaching things to kids. And so I think that that's been a problem, and one of the reasons why, when we did our intergenerational program, we tried to teach, the exact same lessons to kids as what we would teach to adults, but just in a way that is more engaging, maybe.
And I do remember just going to catechism classes in the 80s, and we were, I guess, I don't know if my little glass was filled at the time or not, but definitely it was a very simplistic and literalistic approach to reading scripture. The world was created in 6 days, but no one told you, but this is just a story, it's not how it really happened. So and then you grow up, and the only thing you remember about religion is, well, these priests and nuns told me this nonsense, this rubbish.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so, and that's Linda Fiorentino as Bethany. Do you know her from anything else? So maybe other people are better. We haven't seen.
She's a known face, I guess. I don't know. You're the one who watches all the movies.
I know, but somehow I haven't seen a lot of her movies. Okay, so next we're introduced to someone who is called Azrael, just like Gargamel's cat on the Smurfs. So Azrael. Turns out that Azrael, interestingly, so he's a demon, as we can kind of see from his horns there, that he's not in the Bible. He is but in Islam. So in the Bible, we have this idea that there's 4 archangels, but biblically only Michael and Gabriel are named within the Christian Bible, the Protestant Bible. Within the Catholic Bible, you also have in the book of Tobit, Raphael. So we have 3 archangels, and so usually everybody knows who 3 of the archangels are. But then the most common from the Apocrypha, I think 4th archangel is Uriel. But in Islam, it becomes Azrael. And so Azrael is the Muslim 4th archangel, and he's the angel of death. And so because of that was in Islam, that made its way back into Jewish and Christian mysticism as well. But so in some ways, though, and they're not meaning, so he's obviously not the angel of death, because the angel of death is Loki in this movie. But anyway, so I don't know exactly why they picked Azrael as the name here, but he's one of the demons. All right. And that's played by Jason Lee, who's somebody who also had a lot of different movies with Kevin Smith. And he, it turns out, is the leader of this little guys. So these are the Stygian Demon Brigade, I guess, is what they're identified as. And so they're his henchmen, we find out. Anything more you want to say about Azrael?
No, that's
okay. So next,
Next.
Bethany has a vision. So
the burning bush.
yeah, pillar of fire appears, or burning bush appears. This is a place of revelation, although she doesn't immediately see it as such, and so she sees it as a fire and puts the fire out using a fire extinguisher, which gets fire extinguishing all over Alan Rickman.
This figure here.
And when she's going to hit him with a bat, the bat turns into a fish, so he obviously has all sorts of magical, miraculous powers. He identifies himself as Metatron. He's not going to rape her because he points out that angels do not have genitalia. Angels are not gendered, so that's his...
Although, I mean, depending on what you mean by gender, they are sexless, but they do have genders in this movie.
Well, they're played by male and female actors, but they are not gendered.
Okay. Well,
So I don't know. Anyway, they shouldn't
again,
be.
depending
So
on
angels,
how you define gender.
Yeah, depending on how you define gender. In any event, the angels are not meant to be gendered the way humans are. So this is one thing. This is actually, somebody must have told that to Kevin Smith, and he knows that. He made a big deal out of it, and he with a fairly cheap prosthesis that doesn't look very realistic, he showed that a couple times, in the movie. So he wanted to make a big deal about that. But he also shows off his wings.
Wings that are not very showy, not very impressive.
Well, he's used to being a inexpensive filmmaker, I think. So, in any event, so this is Metatron explains who Metatron is. Had you heard? She has never heard of Metatron. Had you heard of Metatron?
I don't know. It makes me think of cartoons and Transformers. Megatron, yeah.
So
yeah, there you go.
It does seem like so. It does seem like apparently it's not clear what the etymology of Metatron is, and so like Megatron, you could think it's Greek, right?
Right.
So because meta is also a Greek word, as is mega and tron, and so one of the folk etymologies of his name from Greek is Metatronos, so the angel beyond the throne. And so the idea and so the idea of it is that he's like right there at the side of God. He's in a lot of the traditions the apex angel, and that's how he's presented in this movie. And so he is at the very top. He's the voice of God, like the voice of Sauron in the Lord of the Rings. God, every time in this movie anyway, every time you hear in the Old Testament that someone has been talked to by God, it's actually the voice of God that has said that, which is the angel Metatron.
This guy.
Which is probably actually not Catholic theology. So Metatron is not biblical. Metatron is in all kinds of different, Jewish and Christian mysticism. It's in the apocryphal books, the Enoch texts, and so forth. And he has different ways he's understood. So in some of the Enoch books, he is the angel that Enoch becomes when the biblical patriarch, antediluvian patriarch Enoch is taken up into heaven and becomes a divine being. He becomes Metatron in some of these things. But in other things,
That's in Third Enoch?
I think that's in Third Enoch.
Yeah.
And in some of the other understandings of him, he's actually the angel Michael, since Michael is normally understood biblically to be the prince of the angels and the chief angel of heaven, and so it's maybe just another name for Michael. What I would say is, I think in normal Christian theology, it's not an angel who is the voice of God who is the intermediary when we're the intermediary between the divine source and a prophet, as it's understood theologically. So talking in the burning bush it's not Metatron talking, it's Christ. Is, I think, in other words, God's glory, God's logos, that's, God's word is what's actually the intermediary in Revelation in normal Christian theology. But essentially, this is one of the places where we're not seeing the Christ in this movie.
We're not seeing Christ in this movie. However, the idea that God needs an intermediary to speak on behalf of God to humans, that is biblical. Yeah. Because we do have this idea that in Exodus that the people are afraid that God's going to speak and they're going to hear that, and then everyone's going to die because you're not supposed to.
Right. Yeah, and even by the fact that Moses has seen God or whatever makes Moses' countenance change to the extent that he has to be veiled, or something is happening where people aren't looking at Moses directly anymore because it was too much for them to see. And so that kind of thing is biblical. I'm just talking about I'm not sure where he got Metatron from. In other words, it's
a cool name.
Yeah,
Okay with it.
certainly in a bunch of the traditions. So Metatron is telling Bethany that God needs her to do something. God has a little crusade to take her on, right?
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, this becomes like one of the main premises of the movie. Now we're really beginning to get the sense of what's going to happen. At the same time that these two angels are trying to go to this church.
Right. There's going to be a counter plot.
There's a counter plot
Yeah.
To stop them,
Right.
and she is the chosen one. She is the one who has to stop them.
Yes. And so he takes her to a place to get tequila, down the street from where she lives, in order to talk about it, explain kind of the ins and outs of angels. He's explaining that essentially these two angels have been a problem this whole time, that
Right.
the angel of death used to always get drunk and go on benders, and that's the reason why God made a rule that angels aren't allowed to drink anymore, so that's why he had to keep spitting the tequila back out.
It doesn't sound like it's a lot of fun to be an angel
No.
in this
In this
movie.
universe, yeah.
But I think that's it's perhaps what we're getting here is like this idea that if you are a Christian, you're not allowed to do anything fun. I think
Yeah.
like we're talking about is not so much about angels, but about this perception that the church is there to police what we do. And so if you are part of the church, if you're a believer, if you go to church, then you're not supposed to do any fun things like sex or drinking or just having fun in general. I think this is the kind of idea that is communicating here with the silliness.
Yeah. Although you could definitely swear based on all the actions of the different angels, right? I don't know. This is a sweary movie, which is fine. And so Alan Rickman is explaining also, I guess what he now is explaining, this idea of what the plenary indulgences and what the problem would be, right?
Yeah,
So
I think this is the first time that we would learn about what this whole thing means.
Right. And so, when I had first heard that this is all hinging on plenary indulgence, I thought that the movie, I didn't know Kevin Smith's background. It's only later when I saw the movie and had known Kevin Smith if you just had the thumbnail that this is about a kind of a critique of plenary indulgences as a backdoor that's going to destroy the universe, you might think that this is a kind of a Protestant complaint, because that's one of the things that Protestants complained about Catholics about, right?
Right.
And so you might, as a thumbnail, as a Protestant who doesn't know too much about Catholics, think that this is a major problem with the Catholic Church, is that they're always giving away plenary indulgences, So anyway, the idea of a plenary indulgence is that that's not even trying to. This is a complaint that Martin Luther had about a development in the medieval church, where a person is able to be given, let's say, an indulgence. If you make a Jubilee pilgrimage to Rome, then you will get a certificate that you went there, and that will guarantee that some of the amount of time that you're spending in purgatory after death will be alleviated as you are repenting for your sins in the process of purgation, right? And so that's what a plenary indulgence is.
But and in a sense, in the movie, of course, like all these terms are interpreted in a very peculiar way.
Yeah.
But now, yes, to your point about whether the movie is anti-Catholic or not, it definitely is not. If anything, it's anti-Protestant, because it's making fun of this concern that Protestants had or have about indulgences.
Right.
So look at this whole thing that the Protestants are concerned about. Oh, they're making such a big deal about this silliness. So if anything, it's anti the Protestant position, and it's in the same way. At some point in the movie, we talk about transubstantiation in a super silly way, which is another Protestant concern.
Well, exactly. That's one thing. I mean, I don't know if it's. I think it's. I don't know. In some ways, it's criticizing the Catholic Church for being too rule bound. So, in other words, one of the reasons
Yes.
why the person who's thought of this whole thing is Azrael. It's not the two angels. It's actually Azrael's plot, and so the problem with it is that he's saying that the Church has become way too rules focused, and that's actually caused a weakness in the whole divine plan that they're going to try to exploit. Essentially, the weakness is, the idea is, it's portrayed that a plenary indulgence actually is a get out of jail free card entirely in this, which is not actually the case.
Right.
So in other words, that you have to actually still repent, approach repentantly. You can't go on a killing spree and then walk through a magic door and suddenly boom.
Basically that's what they're presenting indulgences. It's just a magic, just gate, and all of a sudden all your sins, all your responsibilities are washed away, and you're back on the good side of God just by going through this magical arch.
And since God said they will never be let back into heaven, and that if they suddenly are let back into heaven, it would create a disruption in the universe because God's infallibility will have been ruined.
Yeah, and this is when we begin to understand what the whole problem with Loki and Bartleby was. Mm-hmm. And at some point, Bartleby says, well, back when God used to be a wrathful God. So they're talking about they're talking about a God that changes.
Right.
A God that changes his or her mind. And Bartleby is trying to convince Loki that, yes, there was a time when your job was to go and just destroy people who were sinners, like in Sodom and Gomorrah, and when the Noah's flood, that only a handful were able to survive. Yes, that was the wrathful God, but God is not like that anymore. So you can't do that. So it turns out that Bartleby, at some point, like 1,000 years ago or something, was able to persuade Loki to stop doing his job, and I think that's when the whole thing of disobedience of angels, of these two angels, set this whole thing in motion.
Right.
The disobedience of the angels, not doing what God wanted them to do, whether or not there was any moral implications about it, but it was their job, and that's what God wanted them to do. They didn't do it. So once angels fall, in traditional understanding of angels, that's it. There's no going back. There's no salvation for angels. And that's why, if they are able to go through this arch at this church in New Jersey, all of a sudden, this whole impossibility becomes true. A fallen angel will be saved.
Yeah.
And that creates a contradiction, because God already condemned, already judged these two angels to this eternal state of fallenness. Now they're going to be back to heaven. And so it means that God made a mistake, that God was wrong, or that God judged them as forever, as sinful, and now God will accept them back to heaven.
Or has to, because it's the rule.
Has to. So that creates a logical fallacy, contradiction in what God is.
Right.
And this has metaphysical implications, apparently. This logical contradiction also will, in the understanding of this movie, will unleash uncreation.
Right. It'll destroy the universe.
So if God is a God who brings order over chaos, which is what Genesis says, then this contradiction will actually undo creation.
Right.
Because it just cannot happen. It's just like God cannot contradict God. And so this is what the whole thing of the movie is about. It's about this existential, universal problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be. So it's set up. The angels are not the two angels aren't too bright, because this is not the first time that an indulgence had been opening. I mean, these guys have been on Earth for thousands of years. Like I was mentioning, like Innocent III said, anybody who goes to Rome in the year 1300 or whatever, you all get a plenary indulgence. Yeah. So in other words, there's easier ways to do this in the past, but anyway.
But yeah, no, they waited until, there was New Jersey.
Mike has reminded us that we have been getting comments. I had forgotten we'd missed that tab, but I opened it up. And so I really don't know. Thank you for your support. I really don't know says, I love this movie.
Really don't know.
I can't believe you guys are watching this. Cheers. Thank you so much for all you do. The videos are always amazing. I'm glad
Why
you
can't we
like
watch
it.
this movie?
Yeah, it's fun.
Everyone was so afraid. Oh no, you're going to hate it. No, it's fun.
So Nathaniel Whiting says the superficiality of the discussion with the nun, that's the theme of the whole movie. Yeah, so I agree with you. So it's differentiating religious people who believe as a performative act from people who don't. So yeah, exactly. So this is, and this is like Leandro, I think I agree with you, and Leandro was also saying that, in other words, that discussion continues throughout as the people, almost everything that happens in this movie, they're all traveling. But what'll happen is that a little bit of action happens, and then they're all sitting around together and having a talk. And this is kind of based on, I think, Kevin Smith's background. All Clerks is a couple different people talking throughout a very inexpensive movie. And even here, even though this is sort of an action movie, almost everything that's action happens kind of off camera. And then there's a couple places where they have an actual fight, but I'm not a huge connoisseur of how choreography works for fighting anyway, but I think it's more, again, inexpensive and not professional how it's being done. But generally, they don't even hardly bother with much of that. And so instead, you just have a new set piece where different people are talking, and this kind of conversation continues. And I was sort of, as I was assembling the frame caps, I was remembering, wow, this really is a all dialogue kind of movie. As different people get together, and then they have these kind of ongoing discussions about, like you say, the different ways of understanding, this kind of meaning. How is this universe working? How much of it is about the dogmatic superstructure that they've learned in church, and how much is meaningful? And Arthur Amma writes, the theme of the movie is in the name. Dogmatic thinking threatens the world and all of existence. So the fact that there is this group of people that have been given rules. They even quote so the Pope is the successor of St. Peter, and they quote the passage in Matthew where the keys are given to Peter to loose in heaven and bind in heaven, and that's allowing since the Pope granted this cardinal, Catholicism WOW cardinal, an ability to grant plenary indulgences. That kind of dogmatic thinking, that rules-based thing, is what is threatening the existence of the universe. So Rain Weber asked, was this movie made after the Da Vinci Code? And the answer seems to be that no. So Da Vinci Code comes out later. Yeah, both the book and the movie.
We actually will talk about that, because the same argument, the same theme of the Da Vinci Code comes up a little bit later.
One of the themes anyway.
So we'll talk about that, Rain.
Yeah, so very good. Okay, so let's continue. Oh, so Bethany wakes up from this vision that she's been having. It turns out that it was just a dream, or was it just a dream?
It was a dream or not, because she's got maracas. I really hate that thing about movies when it's all about, oh no, but here's the evidence.
Yeah. Well, I think, though, that, again, this is a satire, right? So I think that but it's also never clear with Kevin Smith, I think, is he making an incredibly formulaic movie, and all these things happen just because it's a formula, or is he making fun of the fact that every time anybody has a vision, and you're like, oh, was it just a vision? But then they see next to them something that indicates, oh, no, wait, the maracas indicate that I was in the tequila bar. I don't know. So anyway. So then Bethany, with her kind of potentially on a new quest, and is going to set off on it, but then she is immediately interrupted in this quest by our three street hockey enthusiasts who attack her and try to beat her. She's trying to get her keys are out of the car, and then suddenly falling from the sky are two heroes from all the previous Kevin Smith movies, Jay and Silent Bob. Silent Bob is Kevin Smith plays him, so himself in his movies. And they start to then interact with Bethany. She, of course, thanks them for saving her life, but they immediately use that as an opportunity to start hitting on her. And so that's what I did. Do you have anything else about these characters? So
No, you know them better than I do.
These are, these were fun side characters from the original Clerks movie. So the original Clerks movie, the main characters are Randall and Dante, and so they're the main people that are the managers of the clerks in the store, but Jay and Silent Bob are the drug dealers who are doing the drug deals outside. And so they're also mall rats and involved in chasing Amy, as I recall. I haven't only seen that the one time, so I don't remember very well. But anyway, so now they enter into this movie. Alan Rickman, the Metatron angel, has said that Bethany will be aided by the two prophets. And as they are, as she has brushed them off finally, and they're leaving, they mention something about prophets, and she starts to think, well, maybe, wait a second, these are the two prophets? And so she's contemplating that. Meanwhile, we cut to our favorite fallen angels, and in keeping with Matt Damon's desire to go on a killing spree, he's gone to a gun store and bought a big gun. We cut back to Bethany and Jay and Silent Bob, who have come to a diner.
She actually accepted the invitation to go have dinner with them.
Right.
Crazy.
And so they think that this is a date, and she's going to be their girlfriend or whatever. She is not interested in that. She has a quest that she's trying to tell them about. They don't know anything about it. They don't know where to lead her or anything about it. But she had been told by Metatron that she needs to go to New Jersey, and it turns out they're from New Jersey.
They are from New Jersey.
But she is not going to have sex with them. So, actually, at some point or other, Jay asked, "Well, what if it was the very end of the world and Armageddon, and
Right.
and there was no chance, and we're going to die, and there was just us, and things like that?" And she said, "Okay, well then maybe so,
Yes,
yeah,
maybe."
so,
yeah.
so, anyway, she has a car. She lets them drive. Jay does not know how to drive, so he ruins her car. Meanwhile, the angels are on a bus.
On a bus.
Making their way.
Yeah.
So, like I say, there's a lot of pilgrimage
Sitting next to the bathroom door. I mean, who does that? I guess they're angels. They probably don't have a sense of smell.
And so this is where they're having that conversation that you were talking about Matt Damon knowing that God is a real smitey God, and he likes to, he likes to punish sinners, and so he will be very happy with Matt Damon if Matt, as the angel of death,
Loki, right?
Yeah, with Loki. So Loki, he'll be very happy with Loki if Loki resumes his function essentially and starts going around offing sinners.
It becomes very clear at this point that Loki is like this very simple-minded character, and this is like, if anything, it's the dogmatic angel.
Yeah.
It's like, no, these are the rules. This is what we have to do. Sinner, okay, sinners have to pay for for their sins.
Yeah.
Whereas Bartleby is more philosophical. He starts questioning but is that right?
And does God want you to do that?
Right.
I mean, why do you think God wants you to do that?
This is part of the same conversation that started with the Loki and the nun, but like the whole conversation, just you have to imagine that you're at a table having beers or whatever, and people are just talking about it, and not necessarily they're trained in theology, but all these ideas that people are having based on what religion was for you, what you had learned,
based
most
on growing
likely
up
as a kid.
Yeah, and Bartleby makes the point, well, ever since you quit being the angel of death, God didn't appoint another angel of death. So in other words, so that stopped.
And it's not only what you had learned as a kid.
Yeah.
Because this is late 90s, right? So this is a time when like internet is not what it is today. It's not that there was easy access to everything, but
Yeah.
I think people are beginning to just learn that, yeah, you can access information that is out there, and you can learn more than just having to count on your local library.
Yeah. I had a good local library. I had gone there and read the books of Enoch, so I knew who Metatron was.
Not every local library had the Book of Enoch.
Yeah.
Like mine didn't have that.
So, so there are a couple on the bus, and he's married. He's making out with a girl who's not his wife. So that makes Matt Damon like, okay, well, I'm gonna, punish him for adultery. That's one of the big ones as far as Matt Damon's concerned, is his memory from being an Old Testament angel. Bartleby, as a watcher, already knows what everybody has all sinned, so he knows that this guy's got plenty of sins under his belt, and so like Loki, I just calling him Matt Damon. I don't know, Matt Damon, kills him. I guess I think of Loki as the guy from what's his name from all the Marvel
From
movies.
the other Loki, yeah, the Marvel Loki.
From the TV show Loki. Anyway, the Marvel movies. Okay, so anyway, that stops the bus. So that is actually, this killing spree is self-defeating for these angels as they're trying to make their way to New Jersey. And so then you were saying when they get off the bus.
Yeah, he's saying staying alive.
Staying alive.
But this is, once again, here's still all Loki. He is still thinking, this is what I have to do. And Matt Damon is the one that is questioning these things.
No, it's the other one. No, Bartleby's the one that's questioning things.
You put Matt Damon in my brain. Bartleby.
But it's Ben Affleck, you can say that.
Right.
Ben Affleck.
Okay, let's go on.
Okay, so the Jay and Silent Bob have destroyed Bethany's car. And she's decided that she was wrong to even try this pilgrimage. She doesn't think they're prophets anymore, maybe, and so she's going to quit her quest. But as happens multiple times, in the movie, it had begun with Jay and Silent Bob falling out of the sky. Jay will say, "It's such and such if something falls out of the sky," or something like that, and then it'll happen, right? And so essentially, Chris Rock falls out of the sky naked, and so introduces himself as the 13th apostle, Rufus, and so didn't make it into the Bible because of bad PR, or he had a bad relationship with the evangelists, and so he got edited out. But he's the 13th apostle, Rufus, and he's dead, but he's in heaven, and so I guess they don't have any clothes there, and they, everybody else has been able to make it with clothes. Yeah. But anyway, so he makes it, and he is now going to be part of the team as somebody who hung out with JC, beginning back at the wedding of Cana.
The wedding of Cana, yeah.
The little skater boys are also here, but they don't want to engage now that the prophets actually have an apostle on their side. They go back they become spies, essentially. They report back to Azrael. Azrael finds out about this and decides he's got to call in bigger reinforcements. So he's going to get what's called the Golgothan to attack them now. So.
And here they are having lunch where?
Was it called Moobies?
Moobies.
Moobies.
I think, yeah.
And so they all they walk forward until they get to the Moobies fast food restaurant. And so the Moobie character, you can kind of see it in the background, is a calf, a golden calf. And this is a corporation that is both Disney and McDonald's. And so you can tell definitely, as we'll see, that the Moobies...
As evil as it comes.
Yeah, exactly. McDonald's merged with Disney. And so, of course, we remember that the Disney owns the film company, but they also refuse to distribute it. And so they might have refused to distribute it because the board of the Moobies Corporation is shown to be like extraordinarily evil people who are everything from sex traffickers to all kinds of different. When Bartleby.
What about the disclaimer?
Yeah, that's true. Well, anyway, so we'll see. What was this? Do you remember this conversation that they're having right at this point?
Here again, this is the same conversation continues, and here's all these speculative ideas that people.
Right.
I remember having conversations like this. No, Jesus was actually not blonde, like
Right,
in all
of
these
course.
pictures, but Jesus was, well, in this case, Jesus was black.
Right.
And in the idea that there were not just 12 apostles, but there were more apostles. So all these ideas that people were talking about, speculating about, definitely in the 90s, without having a lot of access to information to corroborate, unless you were a scholar, all these claims that you were overhearing here and there. And so this is one of these things that I remember people talking about.
Yeah, that's true. That's what's happening. And of course we've done lectures. There were more than 12 apostles.
More than 12 apostles.
And certainly
and addressing the issue of the ethnicity of Jesus.
Right, we do that as well, right? And so and by the way, though, this idea there's also while it's not a historical idea, historically an idea with historicity, there is a large popular idea of a black Jesus and that kind of a thing. So this is not, Chris Rock is not saying something that's out of that kind of popular thinking, but he fails to convince anybody at the table. He doesn't have any other black characters, I guess, so there's not a lot of sympathy with that idea. So Jay and Silent Bob have made their way into a strip joint. And they find him there, and they, meanwhile, have found another one of our protagonist characters, as we'll see. But as they are meeting that, we go to the movie headquarters, as we were talking about. And like I say, this is why it's not just McDonald's, it's also Disney, because the movie guy there, you can see it's sort of like he's a cow, but he's wearing Mickey Mouse's pants, right? And so there's a clear reference. I think.
It's like we're merging Mickey Mouse with the golden calf of Exodus.
The book of Exodus. So
it's a very obvious, over-the-top references that you can't miss unless you don't know the story of Exodus.
Right. And so in other words, this is the
end all,
one of the end all be all stories of idolatry, I guess, from the Bible. And so that's what the angel of death has in mind, that these corporate people have created a new idol that they are worshiping, which literally is a golden calf. And so they come to this board meeting. Bartleby, who is one of the watchers, who therefore knows all of the sins, goes around the table of all of the different Michael Eisner or whoever all the different Disney board executives are, and says all the things that they're all bad except for the one woman on the board who he says is an innocent. And so having listed off all their sins, then it's time for Loki to do his part and his job. And so he butchers everybody off camera. But anyway, blood gets splattered over the door handles as outside the doors, Ben Affleck is just listening.
And still, I mean, now I guess Ben Affleck, that is Bartleby, is still not participating in the killing, in the punishment. It's only Loki at this point who thinks that's what he's supposed to do, to get back on God's good side.
Yeah.
Even if they're going to get these indulgences, he still thinks that this is how he gets through on God's good side. He still wants to be redeemed, pardoned.
Well, they definitely have two different perspectives, right? Because like you're saying, Bartleby is the more philosophical one. He understands, he's the more dogmatic thinker, I guess, let's say, because he has a loophole, that's a rule that he knows he can get through. Whereas Loki is still wanting to kind of reform and do his function, and he thinks that this is what God wants him to do. In a twisted way.
I guess they're both dogmatic in different ways.
Yeah, different ways dogmatic, yeah. All right, so it turns out that the stripper is a woman named Serendipity, or actually a muse named Serendipity. She shows us that she's not a woman. She's also doesn't have genitals. So anyway, right? And so
I guess that's a thing in the movie.
This is a thing in the movie. They want to make sure that that's the way it works. And it's interesting because, anyway, well, Serendipity is not the name of any one of the muses, and obviously there's no muses in biblical mythology, but
not
so this is
why
that part of that interaction between two, between the two mythologies and things like that. He's bringing both of those kind of things together in this kind of an eclectic movie in terms of how it's creating its mythology, which is like the Sandman.
Like the Sandman, yeah.
Yeah, and actually the Sandman, in one of the quests that they have, when Dream, who's the protagonist of the Sandman, Lord Morpheus, when he's on a quest, he goes and meets the goddess Ishtar, who has, I think, become a stripper in New Jersey.
Yes, very similar.
So I think it's
very similar to this scene here.
Yeah.
I mean, but the idea, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so anyway, and so now we get a new character. And so we have another one of these conversations as she's telling kind of like her part about, like is this conversation about, what's the meaning of life and those kind of things. As we were talking about, the universe continues with now a new character to add. The
conversation about religion and big questions continues at this table. And one of the things that Serendipity says is that your brains have to wake up, right? So it's like not... So pulling people out of the dogma mindset into independent thinking, and presenting God, religion, spirituality as such, not as dogma, but things that you have to think about.
Yeah.
Whereas Bethany is this kind of person that, for her, religion is all about this formulas, and remember, she's reciting the creed and beliefs and things like that. And Serendipity here saying, no, that has nothing to do with that. You just have to ask your own questions, pretty much. This is when that theme is introduced in the movie by this character that has this peculiar name.
Right.
That it's like the opposite of having, like, someone having providence. Like, this is like the idea of, okay, is this a coincidence that we're going through life and meeting all these characters and all these things are happening to us? Or has this been somewhat decided, prearranged by God? And I suppose that because we have this character, we're trying to say everything is just a big coincidence and life is not just predetermined by God. One of the main discussions that is happening, not at this table, but especially with the angels, is the question of free will.
Right. Yeah, there's going to be more free will discussion. There's free will discussion going on a lot, but it's especially with the angels.
But we do have these big conversations, either at this table or at other tables. And at this point, we have talked about free will a little bit about theodicy, and eventually we'll get into even deeper theological conversations.
Well, and then one of the things that happens at this conversation is that Serendipity refers to God as a she.
Right.
And then that's something that Bethany immediately, latches onto and likes. And so the idea of it is that that as a muse, so in other words, God is always using he pronouns in the biblical texts themselves, but the muse says, well, that's how the individual writer, when they experienced the revelation or whatever, they have their inherent human bias, and they filled it in that way. But as I was inspiring the story, I was using she, her pronouns, and they changed it. And then she says that the whole Bible has a gender bias, which, there's a lot of gender bias in it, but although the Bible also has more strong female characters in it than a lot of ancient texts. Anyway, so it could be a lot worse, is all I'm saying. I'm not going to dispute her, but it's also in character for her to have making this case this way. It's the same kind of thing that it is also reflective of what you're saying, this ongoing conversation about like the meaning of life that you have at college, late at night, when you're all drinking like this, or, in the case of Jay and Silent Bob, and smoking pot, and as the conversation continues. And unlike Rufus, so when Rufus has tried to convince everybody that Jesus was black, and that did not make Bethany didn't buy into that one, but she definitely now for the rest of the movie is using God with she, her pronouns.
Right.
And no one else does that until the very, very end. So even though the authoritative angels that she looks to, like Metatron, he continues to use he, him pronouns for God but it definitely is something that immediately changes Bethany's theology. Okay, then suddenly they smell something. This is the Golgothan, which is a excrement demon. So they have a fight with this creature. And so this is like a little bit of humor and slapstick and adventure. And ultimately, Silent Bob sprays it with an odor destroyer, and that allows them to defeat that monster. I don't know. That doesn't have a theological implication, I suppose, right?
This is how restrooms were at bars in the 90s, I guess.
Yeah. So.
Today as well.
Okay, so the angels are been stymied so far in their. There's no more buses. They've been killing people on the buses, and so now they're going to have to. Eventually, while they're there, they run into Azrael. Azrael explains that actually God, everybody knows what they're doing, that they should be keeping a lower profile. They shouldn't be doing all of this killing spree because, in fact, God has actually called in a bunch of reinforcements to stop them from doing this plenary indulgence thing, including the last scion. And I think I don't know if we've been hearing about
No, I think
the last
this is
scion
when we
at this point.
first hear about that.
The last scion, the idea of this is, so this is where, somebody had already just asked about, where did we have this? I lost print me. Anyway, people had talked about, okay, what about, people had asked about the relationship with the Da Vinci Code. And so the Da Vinci Code is based on a pretty really problematic, and certainly not a text with no historical value, the priori of Sion, as opposed to Zion, and this is a thing that gives the idea that the Merovingian line is a descendant of Jesus through Mary Magdalene. And so the idea of the last scion here is that the family of Jesus, anyway, have produced a bloodline that has come down to Bethany. And so it's, I think in this case, not Jesus's progeny, but actually his brothers and sisters, whose children and descendants have come down to Bethany. But in any event, it's a kind of a similar idea.
But these are ideas that, as Rain was asking about the Da Vinci Code. The Da Vinci Code, when it's published in 2003, which is 4 years after this movie, the book, is not presenting revolutionary ideas or new ideas. These are things that people have been talking about for a long time, and there were in the 80s, there was this book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and a series of BBC documentaries where it's the BBC, right? So you watch it thinking, oh, this is TV, this is the BBC, this must be true, where they're talking about the connection between Jesus and Mary Magdalene and all these ideas that then get just absorbed and elaborated into the Da Vinci Code. So people were having these conversations definitely in the 90s about the possibility, the Mary Magdalene is important and had children with Jesus and so on.
We've seen it in like a lot of the movies that we already watched, right? The Last Temptation of Christ, in other words, becomes the love interest in these stories.
That was in the popular mind.
It was in the popular mind.
But what was also in the popular mind that was increasing is like, well, this is a secret.
Yeah.
And they don't want us to know about that, because if we knew about it, then the whole thing, the whole church would collapse, and I don't know, I guess we would all be happy as a result. But but I think you have to understand, again, the context of the late 90s when we were learning about the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi library, and there was real scandal about like those discoveries and the publications and scholars and governments and different interests just putting obstacles to publication of all these discoveries. So there was something that was happening.
Right.
Now, the media, of course, were like exaggerating what was really happening, but of course, the idea that what they're hiding something, they're afraid that we are going to stop going to church if we learn the truth.
Yeah. So yeah, so maybe this is where this. I don't know if that's, it's probably like you say, it's flowing into the same things.
It's flowing in the mind of people at the time.
And so now we understand why. Anyway, that Bethany's has this special role, and now now they're on a train. They're making their way from New Jersey on a train. She's in a train car talking to Rufus, and once again, the conversations continue, and I'm trying to think. I mean, I don't remember. I mean, every one of these conversations blend together with me. The notes that I took when on this conversation were, that she says something like church is boring. She lost her faith when talking to her mother, when her mother would just say God has a plan as like the simplistic answer to why she's suffering. And then her response to that was, what about my plans?
What about my plans?
And so anyway, there's a sense, therefore, that when my plans are not, are not happening, that means God's not listening, and so on. I do think it's interesting that, whereas Metatron called her quest a crusade, she calls it a pilgrimage. And so it is kind of becomes a much more spiritual journey as opposed to a war journey. She's never thought of it, I think, as taking up a sword and doing this. She's on kind of a spiritual quest.
Yeah, she's interesting that way. She does that several times.
Yeah.
That she sees things her own way, which is what Serendipity wanted her to do.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so she needs some food. He's going to go to sleep. She goes into the dining car. She sees Jay and Silent Bob, who have started hanging out with two new friends. And it's our two angels, Loki and Bartleby. And when you first see them, you think that because Azrael has just been warning them, you figure that they actually knew. Clued in, and they've come here. But actually, it turns out, no, this is another one of these coincidences. So the movie, Serendipity is not the only character. So with the exception of people that fall out of the sky, at a particular moment in a particular place, that's not a coincidence. That's planned.
That is planned.
But if you then just go to the very next rest stop and there's a strip bar and that's where you meet Serendipity, that's maybe a coincidence. And so in this case, it also seems like, this is just a coincidence, I guess, that these guys are here, or maybe it was all planned, but that it's none of these guys
Definitely,
planned it.
they don't know the plan at the very least.
Yeah. Okay, and so they split into two groups as Loki and Jay and Silent Bob share. Well, they get toke up together or whatever it is, and they share their conversation, and then the more serious conversation happens between Bartleby and Bethany.
And we learn a lot of things now here that we really go in deep into what Bethany's problem with God is. We had heard a little bit about it in previous scenes, in her conversations with Metatron especially, but it is here as she starts drinking and just getting a little bit more uninhibited, that she's letting it all out. Yeah. And so I think we had already learned that she can't get pregnant, she can't have children. But this is one of the things we learn in this scene, that she's really, really angry at God about, how come my plan, as you were saying before, was to have a family. And God said, no, you can't do that. So why me? Why do I have to suffer? Why is there suffering? Why would God allow me, me, to suffer? So this is what she's presenting, and then turns out that actually we're getting also into Bartleby's mind and how he feels the same way. He feels that, well, in a way, God is unjust. Yeah. Which is also what she is saying. Now, where is justice in this whole system that God is presenting if we are here to suffer and God is allowing that suffering?
I think it's Bartleby who says that he feels that God stopped listening to him.
God stopped listening
Yeah.
To him.
Yeah.
He says, and he, in a way, yeah, he's got a. Although he doesn't say this in this conversation, but we were beginning to see a little bit of a middle child kind of psychology with him.
Like he hasn't gotten his attention from being either the eldest or the youngest.
So he's neither one of the big important angels,
right?
But he's also not, the baby in the family, which is humans. And so as a result, he resents the parents, but he especially resents the little siblings, the humans.
Right. Yep. And so as their conversation goes on, though, Bethany gets more tipsy. She now starts to confide this crazy pilgrimage that she's on, which she's questioning. She's starting to think it's really silly that this is even happening, or it's an absurd thing that she's been asked to do it, and things like that. And she's been asked to stop these two angels. She's the last scion, and this is sort of like,
This is the aha moment.
Now Bartleby is like, oh my goodness, So now he realizes, not only from Azrael that God isn't going to let him to get away. He thinks he's got this thing, but actually God is planning to kill him, or whatever, to stop him and destroy him and everything like that, and that makes him incredibly resentful. And so this is, I think, probably the tipping point for his character.
This is the tipping point for Bartleby, because it is here that this angel that up until this point was a very philosophical and the one that was not really into all the killings that Loki was just going around doing and kind of complaining about it. This is when okay, no, now I have to kill these people.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Whereas this is also like an important point for, I would say, biblical, I don't know if intentional biblical parallel, but definitely when Bethany is just laughing about this thing.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah. How come this is so silly? I'm telling you this thing because it's so silly. Can you imagine God actually making this happen? And this is like the role of all these matriarchs in the Old Testament. That they're all what?
Sarah laughs when God actually comes and says that you'll be, he tells her husband that you'll be the father of many nations, and then she laughs. Right.
So when you're barren, in the Bible, like Sarah, like Rebecca, like Hannah in First Samuel, the mother of Samuel, they all
like Elizabeth.
Well, and then later Elizabeth. Their concern is me, and I just can't have children. But then turns out that is the mother of of course it's a patriarchal
the mother of Isaac, the mother of
the woman is important
Samson,
because she has a son that is important, but
the mother of Jesus and so forth.
But she's doing the same thing, and like Sarah reacts with, okay, come on, this is silly. She laughs.
And so now he's seeing her laugh. So then Rufus wakes up. He sees the angels. He immediately knows who they are. This precipitates a standoff as Bartleby now takes Bethany hostage. This then becomes a fight scene pretty quick. And in the middle of the fight scene, Silent Bob has kind of magic fight powers and is able to, one by one, overpower first Loki and then Bartleby and throw them off the train. Throw them out the door and off the train. And after they've both been thrown off the train, in a reference to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where Indiana Jones threw the Nazi guy out of the Zeppelin. He says, no tickets, or whatever.
No tickets.
And so that happens. Kevin Smith says that to the person who witnessed him throw the two angels off the train.
Which I thought that was very silly. I mean, yes, the reference sort of explains a lot, makes the scene arguably more funny. But also, this is the first time that he speaks in the movie.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so not the last time.
Usually it's reserved, like in like Clerks, he doesn't speak until the very end, when he then shares kind of wisdom that's sort of, I think, like the like the Zen wisdom of the movie, right? Whereas this is speaking to make a reference to the Indiana Jones movie.
Just to make a reference to a silly point in a silly scene in a silly movie.
It's more like a J line probably than anyway. But I guess I don't know how many.
He's going to speak again at the end of the movie, but it almost like it's kind of silly because he already said something.
Okay. So meanwhile, the angels regroup pretty fast. They're immune to getting hurt from getting thrown out of trains, and so this is where they have their now because Bartleby has changed.
This is a different Bartleby.
Right, and so now now he is talking about that this thing that you were talking about, where he is resentful of humans, and he's talking about it because humans have been given the gift of free will. Angels don't have free will. And so now he's very resentful of humans in that.
And it's a self-contradictory kind of philosophy that he's presenting here, because he literally just changed.
Yeah.
This is at the moment that he learned that Bethany was the Bethany that was trying to stop them. This is when he changes, and now he wants to become an agent of destruction.
Right.
But then he's complaining that, we're angels, we can't change, but humans can change.
Yeah.
And we don't have free will, but humans do. Humans have the option to choose their own destiny. But he is choosing his own destiny.
Yeah, so this is the difference between the actual Catholic doctrine and theology, philosophy, or whatever, this idea that we talked about, where angels and the idea of angels and free will actually is very explored. Kevin Smith, I'm sure, probably doesn't know that, but in other words, the idea is that angels don't have, essentially don't have free will anymore. They effectively don't. They have free will, but the fact is that they're already locked in. And so the idea of it as identified by, like I said, for philosophical purposes in the Middle Ages, medieval theologians used the idea of angels as essentially like a thought experiment, as they were trying to think about what are the ramifications of free will. Do we have free will? That's still an open question. And so Anselm of Bec, this 11th century philosopher, wrote a treatise on the freedom of choice, on the fall of the devil. Why did the devil fall? And so the idea of it is that angels have a much more pure intellect, and they don't have all this fog of confusion and contradictions. Mm-hmm. And so it's not clearly why they are created this way, but essentially right at the very beginning, in this period that is called the War in Heaven or something like that, the angels essentially all, made their choice good and bad, more or less like the Krusty the Clown doll that in the Simpsons horror episode, where it could be switched to good or evil. Here's your problem. Simpsons it was switched to evil. So but anyway, so they're all they're all switched to, all the ones that are switched to good only do good. And so as a result of that, this thing that has happened, in the story, could never happen. Because, in other words, once the angels are switched to good, which they do at the very beginning, mm-hmm. In all of this, then ever after they will always choose good. They will always choose the obedient. And so therefore, Loki, as the angel of death, would never stop doing what God wanted and then become a fallen angel midstream.
Right.
In other words, after he's already been on the one side and now is in this intermediate thing, and same thing Bartleby. So in other words, the two of them the only way you can be a fallen angel according to Christian theology itself is right at the very beginning. So Azrael and, we'll see Azrael, what his situation is, but Satan and the other, all the other demons that are whatever, Asmodeus and so forth, that all of those are all that all comes from the beginning. You don't have this late stage angels changing, but because that doesn't exist in the View Askew universe, like you're pointing out, they actually do have free will, right. and they're exercising their free will, and they're changing, especially Bartleby, right?
And here Loki tells him that you sound like Lucifer.
Yeah, so the free will is operational for these two angels anyway, and so as a result, they've each flipped and chosen one of them in the twisted way, thinking
Right.
that he's doing good, and the other one who's decided that he is going to rebel now at this point, right?
And at this point also, like, there's other contradiction in Bartleby's, what is this? Goals, I would say.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, he resents God greatly because he thinks God is very unjust. But on the other hand, he wants to go back to God.
Yeah.
Which, again, that's why I said that this is like this middle child psychological issues that he has, that he really wants what he hates,
Right.
or at least what he says he hates.
Right. Let's move along. So they now also are at odds with each other, and so this is introducing a, kind of like a conflict where, like you say, in a way they've switched sides, and so now Matt Damon is not sure that he wants to do all of these things and even go through with it all, and again, because Ben Affleck is sounding like Satan, he's becoming more dubious of him because his switch has gotten switched on to evil. So we then go and have, another one of these conversations, this time around a campfire, and they're all there. I'm trying to think of what happens in this one.
I don't know, but I remember the next scene.
Yeah, so then she goes off, storms off into the forest. She falls into a lake, and from the lake, then Metatron comes walking on water to talk to her. And then they all are transported.
And this is when he tells her, that it's fine. What you're going through is understandable, because it's a lot for you in the same way that it was a lot for Jesus when he was 12 to understand that he is actually God. Now, he doesn't say you are also God, but
he compares her to,
he compares her to Jesus.
Yeah, this is where he says, didn't you notice that the Bible's missing 18 years of Jesus' life?
Right.
It didn't go that good. We had to use that. We had to edit that out. Essentially, is that idea. So.
Right, and again, it's like these kinds of things that were in the popular imagination from ancient times, but definitely in the 90s. Like, oh yeah, what happened? Did it go to India? Did it go here, there?
Yeah, absolutely. And so then Metatron transports them all to a restaurant in the town that they need to go to.
A nicer restaurant.
A nicer restaurant in the town that they need to go to. I was noticing again here at this scene that everybody's continuing to use male pronouns except Bethany, whose theology has changed. This conversation continues. So we just
this conversation also I think is when Metatron reveals that they have lost.
They've lost God.
They don't
that
know
God
where
lost,
God
right.
is.
And that's why they need her. That's why they need Bethany, because they also explain that Bethany is the last sign to everybody.
So
here.
apparently, this is like a pretty weird take on incarnation doctrine, where God takes human form, but then gets disconnected from the rest of the divine realm, and all the angels have no way of contacting or communicating with God. So yes, this is why all these bad things are happening, apparently, is because God is lost.
So we'll come more to that.
Yeah. And it just makes me think of this is 1999 and this movie, What If God Was One of Us?
The song.
Just the song, Just a Stranger on the Bus. The idea, pop theology at the time of this Joan Osborne video where there's all these people. Oh, maybe one of them is God.
Having a very anthropomorphic understanding of God, and this is part of another idea. Also, I think of a very anthropomorphic understanding of God is also something that comes from the way God is taught, maybe in Sunday school, and that kind of a thing, or as you're trying to picture God. So they also in this they are reminded again that the whole person that's responsible for all this is Cardinal Glick, so they decide to go to Cardinal Glick and try to talk him out of actually opening his thing and offering the plenary indulgence, so that would be just a way to get out of this whole thing. And he absolutely is not interested in that. So they have a little bit of a pep talk or pitch and fight with him, and he absolutely doesn't agree, as I recall. And then the angels make their way to New Jersey. The guys have all, after their failure with the cardinal, they're all hanging out in a bar. So again, continuing their conversation.
Conversation again.
This is part of what the whole movie is. Then Azrael shows up in the bar and starts, fighting with everybody kind of back and forth, and including the bartender, and then Azrael,
a holy bartender,
just takes into, yeah, exactly. He makes the pun, a holy bartender, by filling him full of holes. And that kind of introduces a thing where Azrael, with a machine gun, and his 3 little demon skater boys are all holding them hostage. So now our heroes have all been captured and are not going to be able to stop the angels from going into the church door and destroying the world. So we're set up to that point. The ceremony is happening. The cardinal has the one Protestant in the show, the mayor. He's not holding it against her. And interrupting the whole procedure, though, are the 2 angels who announce that everybody's condemned. Actually, it's now the one that normally would be saying this is Matt Damon, who's the angel of death, but now he's not sure that he wants to do any of this. And so now they've switched roles, and it's Ben Affleck that is announcing judgment on everybody. Again, Loki doesn't want to do it, but he goes forward. A cop starts to stop them because he assumes that they're just regular mortals, and immediately has his neck snapped, which causes a immediate panic, and everyone flees, and there's chaos has erupted now at the ceremony. They're now, Bartleby wants them to, show off their true selves as they're involved in this whole thing. Loki is not sure. So meanwhile, back in the hostage situation, they're all sort of being held, and they're watching it on the news, so they're realizing that the world's about to end and there's nothing that they can do about it. And then we get more of this conversation now from Azrael's perspective. Azrael explains, or it is explained anyway, that Azrael, in this whole period when this flipping of switches that I was talking about happened, when there's an immediate moment in the pre-existence or whatever you want to call it, at the beginning of creation, right, when the angels are fighting, there were all the loyal ones, and there were all of the ones that went with Satan, and Azrael was a neutral because he had been a muse.
But again, this doesn't have any kind of foundation in any ancient books.
No, this is not, because in Azrael, as one of the 4 archangels in Islam, is a good angel. So the angel of death is good. In other words, that was the same thing like Loki's good, right? Or supposed to be good, even though he's killing everybody. So he's fallen at this point. Anyway, in the cardinal position of him being an archangel, he shouldn't be a demon. So it is a confusing thing. But in terms of this idea of neutral players in the war in heaven, that's actually that's another speculative thing that happened in Mormon doctrine, and it ends up having a very bad. Certainly not in our doctrine in Community of Christ, but in Mormon speculative doctrine from the 1840s, and it's the foundation for the Mormon explanation of the curse of Cain and various racist stuff. So anyway, so neutral players in the war in heaven. So anyway, the same philosophical idea is explored here for Azrael. So they continue to talk and listen, and ultimately decide to have a fight. And so essentially they convince Silent Bob to use the Cardinals he's going to give him a free whack with the golf club.
The golf club.
But because it's the Cardinals golf club, it turns out the Cardinal has blessed it. And again, because the whole point here is that all of the dogmatic rules of the church are actually operative. That's the whole reason why the universe is in trouble. The club actually is going to be a dangerous weapon. They also tell Bethany to bless the sink water. She does so, and so therefore when they put the 3 little demon boys into the sink, they are destroyed because they've now impacted holy
I
water.
think that's when they say the angels can transubstantiate.
Demons can't transubstantiate.
The demons can transubstantiate.
Yeah,
and it's
so
like, what,
Kevin
this doesn't
Smith
have
has
any,
a really weird
this
idea
doesn't
about
have anything to do with anything here.
Well, so they're using this idea. So transubstantiation is something that's completely different, but Kevin Smith uses the word transubstantiate in order to say that angels can become humans,
Right.
but demons can't. And so there is no hope for Azrael. He can't become a human and go through and get a plenary indulgence. It's the two angels that can go do that because he's a demon. And so, but the idea of it is that if the angels cut off their wings, they will transubstantiate and become humans, which is, by the way, what happens in the Sandman. So this is another reason why I think that when Satan cuts off his wings and retires or whatever, and so I sort of feel like that's where he got that idea from. But anyway, so that's what ends up happening here. And so as a result, they're able to defeat all of the demons, and it turns out that Silent Bob is a agent of God or whatever. No, it's the baseball, or sorry, the golf club.
The golf club.
And so they explain how the demons had to follow all these same dogmatic rules because that's what the whole part of the whole, like we were talking about, the theme of the movie. So our crew finally are able to make it to the scene of the massacre at the church. They're just seeing all of the dead people, including the cardinal whose head has been knocked off or blown up, and everyone's dead all around except for Loki, who's had his wings cut off, and he's looking up where Bartleby is flying around, picking people up and dropping them to the ground, which is, causing everybody to, how are we going to stop these guys, right? And so they're not sure if the angels have actually been through the gate or not. And so the danger is if they've actually walked through the door and not, then you can't actually kill them. And so it's unclear, right?
At this point,
they can't. So if Matt Damon's been in and out, then he could potentially you could kill him, and that would be what you want to do. But we don't know yet what happens. And so Bartleby comes down, and he realizes that he's in the driver's seat between all these guys, aren't going to be able to do anything to him.
It has become Catholicism WOW.
Yeah, so Catholicism WOW is now Catholicism OW.
Just this frustration that comes out of these promises of renewal of churches often.
So Bartleby threatens Bethany, but fairly quickly they all start fighting back and forth. Or I guess he has his last encounter here with his companion. It turns out that Loki has transubstantiated and is fully human, and that means that he has a conscience now, which is why he doesn't want to do any of these things that Bartleby wants to do. But it also means that he's become fully mortal, and so Bartleby stabs him, and that's the end of him. And so he had not gone through the gate yet, so this is not causing a cosmic problem. But now the only one who's going to go through is Bartleby. Loki's died as a regular mortal. Mm-hmm. So now, because it's the very end of the world, Jay is convinced that the deal that they can have sex at the end of the world, is operative now. But while the fight's going on, but what ends up actually happening is he says that the homeless guy
guy that they were talking about at church when she was introduced actually is in a hospital right there.
And we failed to mention that Metatron mentioned that skeet ball is one of the things that God liked to do when God was in a mortal body, and that gives Bethany the trigger that she realizes that God is in that body, and if we get her out of that body, or get her is what Bethany would say, out of that body, then the whole thing will be able to be resolved. And so she's very happy and actually kisses Jay. And so we're still having our showdown, but essentially what ends up happening is Jay shoots at Bartleby, but only destroys his wings, which allows him to transubstantiate, so he's actually not helping at all. Meanwhile, Silent Bob and Bethany are going for the hospital, while Bartleby is, just convinced that his plan is, winning. He can't stop winning here. But Bethany has gotten and found the homeless guy.
Where is God? God is in the hospital.
God's in the hospital. God's in the homeless,
there you
everything
go.
like that. God has presence there. And so she pulls the plug,
That's not supposed to do that.
Yeah, well,
The priest told her.
yeah, not supposed to. But anyway, she does not what the priest wants. Instead, now God then is freed. As God is being freed, that causes a reaction where Bethany's thrown and falls on something and is stabbed through and dies. But meanwhile, God is released and instantly is able to transport.
And who is God?
Yeah, exactly. So as soon as Bartleby is actually able to open the doors and get there, he unfortunately finds out that God is there. And we find out that God is Alanis Morissette.
God is Canadian! Yes! I knew it!
And so Alanis Morissette plays this. And then she doesn't speak.
Isn't it ironic?
It's ironic. Is that is that how it works?
Don't you think?
Well, I mean, the part of it is that the ironic song is not actually talking about irony, as we know, but it's actually talking about unfortunate things that happen that you complain about and randomness. So it actually is related to serendipity in this and why am I suffering kind of things.
I think it's a perfect choice, not just because she's Canadian, but because of that song that is about frustration and how random things happen and rain on your wedding day and things like that.
Yeah, it's very Gen X, very 90s. It's very appropriate for this movie. So. And so, in the presence of God, even Jay bows. Ultimately, Bartleby is so moved by being in God's presence that he says he's sorry. And God embraces Bartleby. But then everybody has to close their ears who's mortal, because God can't be, as we talked about before, you cannot hear God's voice and live, or be in God's presence and live. And so that's shown this way by having, Bartleby, who's now become fully mortal. He's substantiated in the.
If I were her as a singer, I would have issues with this. Oh, finally, when she's like singing there and like, oh my God, you don't want to hear this.
My singing causes people's heads to explode.
Right.
So essentially, it's the full. Speaking of Indiana Jones again, so the full Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of thing. With heads melt, in this case, blow up. And so Alan Rickman is kind of like his ears, covering his ears. That was quite a noise. And so then, we are able to kind of have the kind of close up as we are now. God is now returned.
She's got a new dress.
God has a new dress. Jay says all kinds of things the way you expect this character to do. God kind of ends up shushing him. So. And we just sort of start to have kind of the wrap up, of which the last real thing is obviously everything has caused chaos. God looks at it all and cleans that all up and makes the street and all the chaos gone.
Fixes everything, and she
Deus ex machina, as we say, right? God fixes everything at the end, and including poor Bethany has died, which has obviously made Silent Bob tear up. But of course, God is also able to heal Bethany. Alan Rickman says, wax on, wax off. So Karate Kid reference. And with that, using that same technique, Bethany is brought back. And as Bethany is brought back, she's saying, well, he said, we're going to have a lot more things for you to do. And she says, sure, I'm the last scion. He's like, no, you were the last scion. Now she's going to be the last scion.
Like the biblical women now.
So she's no longer barren. She's
you were
now
laughing, Sarah.
Conceived immaculately. Yeah. And so now that's going to be how everything wraps up. As all of our heroes, she's going to right before God leaves, she asks now a new question.
And this is why I thought, maybe even if we're not talking about advanced academic theology and big philosophical questions that would among people who know these topics, but this is good. I think this is very sophisticated how she goes from the original question that she had to the new question of what is it that she had? Why are we here?
Yeah. So she'd
So
been
it's-
asking about suffering the entire time, right? So the original question
The
is,
original
what,
question
what
was,
about
why
my
do-
plans?
why do I
why am I
suffer?
suffering? It's not even almost the why is suffering a universal condition. It's rather, why? What about my plans?
Why my plans, my suffering, and now it's like about existentialism.
Right.
But why are we here? So it's
Yeah.
no longer about me. It's about us and purpose.
But again, even unlike what Alanis Morissette is able to show us here, that unlike what you might have been taught in Sunday school or something like that as a child, this is not a question that can be simply answered. so she beeps her nose,
Yeah.
and this is a question that in existentialism, you have to live with, as opposed to one that if God here was allowed to talk, if Metatron were to talk for God and give her like a 7-word answer, that would ultimately be very unsatisfying and unmeaningful. But instead, but we have now moved from a self-focus
A self-focus
Yeah.
and also dogma
and dogma, right?
to the idea of like a more universal focus, and also understanding that you can answer existential big questions with either doctrine or dogma, or even with the same simplistic explanations that they told you when you were a kid,
Right.
and then filled up your little
With a little glass.
your little
Now
glass
you're the
when
big-
you were a kid, and you
big
were
glass.
happy with those answers. But there's no answer that is going to satisfy your adult mind that is an answer to a question like that you can answer with a few words.
Exactly.
Although God here is a 100% anthropomorphic Garden of Eden God,
Yeah.
that she's happy
Yes, so
smelling the flowers.
Alan Rickman
and
says, "I told you she was funny."
she's kissing people, so she
Right.
is, like as Bartleby was saying, is not a wrathful God. She loves everyone. And so it is a little bit of like this, the God, Jesus loves you theology, and I guess God also loves to do handstands and things like that, which is not ultimately super satisfying. But at the very least, we are moving away from like the simple answers and dogma and doctrine into just see what's next, like to live with that uncertainty.
Yeah. All right. And so then that's kind of the end, as all of our cast kind of goes.
This is interesting, right? Because like even that's why I was saying this is a very Catholic framework, because at the end of the movie, God and the host of heaven go back inside the church.
Yeah.
And that's where, I guess that's where God lives. Saying God is in church.
And so that leaves our heroes to contemplate where they're heading off, and that's the end.
And here is like this, like the question I think comes up, like, do you believe?
Yeah.
And Bethany says, well, I think she says no, or I don't know, but I have an idea. And again, this concept of you just can't believe in ABC doctrine. This is it, like the creed.
Yeah.
That going back to the beginning, like I believe in the one God, creator of heaven and well, not. Do I believe? I don't know if I believe in that, but I have a concept that I can start working with. I think that's the transformation of that character. I think it's pretty good. It was more sophisticated than I expected out of a comedy that maybe is not super funny. I don't know you.
Yeah. Well, I think Clerks is a lot funnier.
Clerks is funnier, yeah.
But anyway,
I don't like comedy in general, but I was surprised by
I think
the
it was
theological exploration.
I think
here.
there was so much conversation that I think was, I don't know. I guess maybe I was listening to it for the conversation and less for the jokes. I did laugh out loud several times as we were watching it. So
maybe yes, but I was really following this conversation and really just remembering in the context of 1999. 1999, we thought that the world was going to end because the computers were about to stop working because of the 2YK bug. And so in the same way, I think, and I don't know if I'm reading into the story and into what Kevin Smith is trying to do here, but it's like a theological take on the Y2K bug.
Yeah.
Like the idea that just because we had been using in our computers, which you don't even see computers in this movie, I think, but everyone had computers by then, and there was this anxiety that because the dates were only 2 digits, computers were going to stop working, and all of a sudden the whole world was going to collapse because of this technicality in a computer. And I think that this technicality in the Dogma, I think is the same kind of thing. Oh, because 2 guys are going through this arch, the whole universe is going to collapse. I don't know, maybe there might be a connection there, I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that.
But God, that was a good time to work in IT. I thought I was going to be rich. But.
Well, as we've gotten this far, let's go back to some of the conversations that everybody's been having in the comments.
Oh, yeah.
I guess when we were running around and we were talking about the angels, I wasn't clear what I was saying, or I said I misspoke. We're definitely, what I'm trying to say in terms of the angels is that angels aren't, in normal Christian theology, angels are not humans. They are a totally different order of creation, and it's understood, I think, to be an order that lacks gender. So the angels are not male and female, and all the other kinds of ways that humans experience gender, including being non-binary and all of the ways that humans, when we talk about, there's sometimes Christians very inaccurately quote Genesis and say, male and female created God them, in other words, as if there has to be only male and female, as if God also created, separated the land from the water and created ocean and continent or whatever in the Genesis narrative, and yet there is all of the gradient in between. There are wetlands. There are there's beach. Mm-hmm. In other words, that whole spectrum of gender is all affirmed in creation for humans. Angels are generally, although sometimes they're portrayed looking pretty masculine or pretty feminine, what they're making the point is that in the Kevin Smith movie they were doing very, very clearly about no genitals.
It was that's why I think we don't often like to use the word sex, but I think in this case we're talking about, you said I was saying lack of genitalia, and that's why I said maybe it's more accurate to say sex less, because I mean
they were making that complaint in the movie. In other words, in the movie, Matt Damon was saying, if I'd been able to masturbate, maybe we wouldn't have gotten so pent up or something like that. And so again, it's this hang up that Christianity has with sex and making rules against sex and all that.
Yeah, and that's why I was saying this is like not necessarily thinking about angels, this kind of this whole obsession with the genitalia of angels. And I think you were just trying to point out
that they're getting it right in the sense that
as opposed to what we see in the movie.
Angels are different from humans.
That movie, they do have genders, and which is weird because I guess that's also like pop culture of our time, that we have to imagine gender in an angel that could be more like in more classical depictions of angels. Sometimes they were extremely androgynous and you couldn't tell. It's like
and so it's like the
but I think that would have been a little unsettling in the 90s to show a very androgynous angel. There were like a few movies with androgynous characters that I remember, like Stargate.
Right.
And that was very unsettling for most people.
In the 90s, yeah. Well, so for example, in the pilot of Star Trek, the Theologians, the way they present these aliens that have, are supposed to be very alien is that they had female actors, and then they dressed them up with the giant brains on their heads, and then they used male actor voices, I think, to dub them over, in order to try to, get around that. That's not what he was trying to do. So in Kevin Smith is not, he had essentially the two main angels are bro angels, right? But they were just making the point multiple times by showing them pull their pants down to show that that they're Barbie dolls down there is what they're saying.
Yeah, and
so that's
like
just what we're just reacting to the movie.
Yeah.
I also want to say, in terms of the understanding of God, the traditional Christian understanding of God is that God is not your father in that sense, in any kind of literal sense, because God also transcends gender, right? And so that when in the Genesis story, when people are created in God's image, both female and male, that is reflecting a God that transcends, and that is not just a male God. God does not look like Zeus, even though it's pictured like Zeus,
but here,
as of the Renaissance. And so it's perfectly appropriate to have when you as a human are envisioning God, you can envision God as your heavenly mother or as your heavenly father, but you just have to be aware that that's your own human way that you're connecting to the divine. So.
And still, this is, I would say that, was it common at this time? I think, yeah, like there was a lot of feminist liberation theology going on at this time, but I'm not sure that it was so common in pop culture to talk about God as a she, especially in a Catholic context.
Oh, yeah.
But still, it's a very anthropomorphic God that is in the mind of the creator here.
Yes, absolutely. So Harvey Squire 7523 says, well, wait, what about offspring of angels and women from Genesis, the Nephilim? So again, there are parts of the Bible that predate Christian theology, and so therefore don't work, right? And so the idea of that is that those are the sons of God are having children with the daughters of men, and so originally that would have been the sons of God. There would have been the rest of the gods in the sons of El, within the Canaanite pantheon, right? And so this is essentially a mythological story of gods taking human wives and creating demigods, and so then they are the heroes of old. So it's the same way that gods are having, in Greek mythology, are having mortal relationships, and so then the offspring of those between the child of a god and a mortal becomes somebody like Hercules or Heracles and Theseus and Perseus, and in other words, all of the heroes are all like that. And so the Nephilim is exactly the same thing for that. That's not so that's mythology that predates the what I'm talking about for the later development of angelology, which is actually all post-dates when Genesis was written. So. Examusic asks, why is there no salvation for angels? That doesn't make sense. So
again, this is like the
medieval
metaphysical kind of universe that they are presenting in this movie.
Well, but I was talking about, maybe they're reacting to what I was saying that Thomas Aquinas and Anselm Belk said, where, in other words, once the angels flipped one way or the other, I was saying that that's where they are forever, and then Satan like, and all of the
exactly
all of the angels that made that choice at the beginning, they are forever that way, right? And so then there's no salvation for them. Well, so because ideas like universalism and universal salvation have developed more since then, and so I think that in the conversation that they're having in the 12th and 13th century, I don't think that they have figured out the ramifications as much about how universal, or like say eternal damnation, they weren't as worried about that as a ramification. Now, subsequently, people have said, well, that doesn't adjust. How would a just God ever allow for universal damnation, universal punishment? And so an argument that many people have is that their universalism is that ultimately everyone will achieve salvation, including Satan, right?
And another thing that we have to remember in this movie is that we're mixing a lot of theologies, mythologies, and from different places and eras. So it's not necessarily going to be consistent.
Yeah.
But the view that they're exploiting here is that, yeah, apparently this is going to cause a contradiction because this cannot happen because these angels have already, in the context of the understanding of what an angel is and what happens to angels in this movie, is they have already done something to be on the bad side of God, and now they can't go back to heaven once they're fallen.
Yeah.
That's what let's say an assumption about the nature of angels in this movie is that.
I just lost the...
You have a lot of
I have too many
tabs
open. I just lost my...
Oh, someone is concerned because
Oh,
I said I made a blanket condemnation of comedy. I did not. That is a misinterpretation of what I just said, Deborah. I guess what I should have said was, I'm a little suspicious of people who try to be funny always, which is, it's a cultural thing. You're not that I don't, but when other people do it, yes, I'm always suspicious. Why are you trying to make me laugh? And that the same thing applies to comedy. But then turns out sometimes things that are not supposed to be comedic or unintentionally funny, I love that. Yeah, there were a few things in this movie that were actually pretty funny.
Yeah. Well, Dresserama also asked, I understand when Loki was referring to Satan as the morning star, and I later learned that Jesus is the morning star. How can they both be called the same thing? So, so the reference to Satan as the morning star is one of the things, or one of the references in the Old Testament. The idea of a universal devil didn't really exist in the time period when most of the Old Testament is written. And so there are only a few references that get glommed together to create the concept by the time you get to Second Temple Judaism, the apocryphal period, what Christians later understand kind of in New Testament times, where you have Satan, who is also Lucifer, who is also, Lucifer is the morning star.
Isn't that also Venus?
The morning star is Venus.
Ishtar?
Yeah. So Venus, the planet Venus, is both the morning and the evening star. So that not all ancient people understood that, but at a certain point they did get it. And so Venus, because of the importance of Venus as being very close around the sun and being there present and very, very bright, like when the sun rises and sets and things like that, because of the closeness of it and closeness to us, it became a very important astronomical body and therefore a god. And so it is the goddess Venus and Ishtar and Aphrodite and all of those kind of things, but it also is associated with Satan by the time you get to some of the Christian time period in Second Temple Judaism, but not everybody, right? And so in the same way, where I was saying how, which one was it? There could be a bunch of things. It was, I was saying how Metatron, on the one hand, could be just God's number one angel that he just created by himself, or it could be Enoch that gets transmuted into an angel, or it could just be another name for Michael. In other words, different books and different ancient prophets and groups thought of it different ways. Well, so the person who wrote the book of Revelation, John the Revelator, takes that same imagery of Venus, the planet Venus, the morning star, and associates that kind of glory, with that coming glory and things like that with Christ. And so is Satan, neither Satan nor Jesus is literally the planet Venus, and so anyway, and so that's how it can both be, because different biblical authors use imagery differently, and so the more usual way of using the word morning star is to refer to Satan, but you can also see it the other way. So,
Almodovar, Yes, every movie of Almodovar. If you Darthorama, you were asking me, is there a comedy you like?
Okay.
Yeah, Pedro Almodovar, the Spanish filmmaker, from the beginning to end, I just can't stop laughing. There you go. I do like some comedy.
You do. I've seen you laugh at comedy movies. So David Latour says, isn't Bethany the new Mary in this movie? So I was thinking, yeah, so certainly, obviously, since Bethany is going to give birth to the next last scion, that's certainly one of the roles. And she's also Sarah, and
she's a lot of characters, right? I mean, in a way, she's a Jesus character.
She's also a Christ
as well.
character, right? So that's why I was saying Christ really isn't in this movie unless Bethany is Christ, right?
I mean, she dies and is resurrected.
So yeah, and Alan Rickman, Metatron, compares her directly to Jesus. So she's been essentially a chosen one to do this particular thing. And so there's an idea then in Dogma anyway of ongoing need for messianic activity, I guess. And so that's probably what's happened in this. So maybe more the new Jesus in this movie, but maybe also after being Jesus, going to be the new Mary. So since there'll be another new female Christ as her daughter. All right. Oh wait, no, here's another one. Matthew Troxel asks, is there a good use for dogma as a Christian?
I think so, yeah. I think it's useful because I like when people have conversations like the conversations that everyone is having in this movie. And I feel like sometimes we're afraid of having conversations like the conversation that Bethany was having with Bartleby on the train, where they're sharing like their angst and their existential dread and but I guess these are conversations that we see a lot in the chat, but sometimes with our friends and family, and even, I mean, if you go to church, even with the other people who go to church, we don't often talk about.
But is that conversation that they were having? That's not dogma? That's them having.
Oh, I thought you meant Dogma, Matthew, as the movie Dogma.
No, he's meaning the. Well, maybe I'm wrong. No, I was
talking about the movie.
Okay, yeah. The movie's a good example of what people could do to have their own personal faith explorations and through conversations in between having to fight demons, metaphorically, hopefully.
Yeah, I read Dogma with capital C, but this is Dogma with small c, with small d.
So we try to be a pretty undogmatic church, and I think that we're not about we have a principle that is sort of like truth wherever it's found, and so we're always open to new insights and new thinking. So I think that we're more on the, like Leandro was talking about, the on the train having conversations kind of a church as opposed to that.
Yeah.
Although I guess I will fall back on some very baseline, like dogmas is just that I think that like one of the leaps of faith that we make is that is deciding that we see the divine is ultimately good or creation is ultimately good, as opposed to being just about power or just meaningless. And so that would be, I mean, is that dogma? It is a.
But I'm not sure that is dogma in this group, because you might disagree and still be part of the group.
That's true.
But the problem with dogma is that if you don't agree in a particular statement, then you no longer are allowed to be part of the group.
Right. Well, we're non-creedal, so we don't have. If dogmaticness is especially about having a creed that you have to adhere to, and that's not how we do it as a church. And we try. I think we don't evaluate, right? So I often say we're non-dogmatic. so I'm not sure if there is a positive sense in that way for us. Anyway.
I think there are sets of doctrines and beliefs that a religious group can have.
Yeah.
That more or less are going to define what the religion is about, I would say.
I know, but we tend to do them as like principles that you therefore have to think about, as opposed to simply like making a list and saying, this is, if you get a plenary indulgence, within
Right.
this time frame, we don't have that kind of a thing.
But yeah, I mean, what I'm thinking of is, well, you might still have like a set of beliefs. For example, you believe that God is, or the God exists, but and that you go with that, but then you might have someone.
But we have a lot of people in our group that
But then someone said, "No, I don't believe that there is a God." And so, if you don't even have to agree on that point, then can you say But the point is there, and it's one of the things that defines the group. But then you're allowed to disagree with that very basic thing and still be part.
Right.
That's
well, we uphold things, but it doesn't mean you have to adhere to every single one of them in order to be part of it, right? So that's how the flexibility works.
And I think that the flexibility is more what you were saying in terms of principles, which is what I guess where the movie Dogma, capital D, is taking us toward, is the idea that you have to be a free thinker and do your own spiritual exploration, as opposed to trying to inherit answers and a certain way of doing things and kind of understandings of what religion is and is not, that has been inherited and someone told you, and you have just blindfoldedly accepted them as matters of fact. And so the movie is taking Bethany out of that kind of mentality into a more free-thinking mentality, conversation on the train, exploration of existential questions without necessarily finding the answers, but the whole spiritual past is entertaining those questions.
Right.
And for entertaining those questions, you still need to have certain principles that maybe you're going to uphold, as you were saying.
Yeah, she definitely was not being fed back in that parish in the Catholic Church, the church in Illinois. In other words, that priest was not helping her at all, but she's now had a pilgrimage, a voyage of spiritual discovery that's caused her to reevaluate things, and so now she's on a life journey. So, all right. We're going to wrap up. Thank you all. Is there more?
Look at that, it's late. Yeah.
No, we've gone on a long time. We thank you all for being with us. I think we've gone on longer than the movie by a lot, so hopefully you enjoyed that, and we always appreciate it. We like having these discussions.
Part of the conversation. I feel like I'm on the train.
Yeah. And so we will see you all. We're about to, like I say, relocate to Italy, and we'll start to find historic sites and do videos from there. And so watch us in shorts very soon. Thanks again.